From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Hamish MacBain and welcome to Who Wants to Be a London Mayor?
We'll see, won't we? I want to expose the fact that he'll do a consultation and then take absolutely no notice of it whatsoever.
Yes, I'm really proud that I was the mayor who froze TfL fares between 2016 and 2021. What Londoners want to see is a mayor doing his job he's required to do by statute.
A series of special episodes of the Standard podcast focusing on London's bitterly contested mayoral election. By day, I'm the deputy editor of ES magazine, out every Thursday and Friday. Last year, we interviewed the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, around the release of his book, Breathe. And I have to say I was quite shocked by the revelation that he doesn't have Rishi Sunak's mobile number. It made me think back to those TV appearances during the pandemic, when Khan was being grilled about getting PPE for bus drivers, and he basically just kept saying, "I've asked number 10, I'm just waiting to hear back." This in turn made me think, how much power does the Mayor of London actually have? And more broadly, what is the point of the Mayor of London? Could he or she, for example, wake up, decide to double bus fares, or ban people from listening to music on the tube or whatever, and just do it? Who, if anyone, in government would he need to get sign-off from? Or is this largely just a ceremonial role, with Days opening new swimming pools, posing for selfies, and Boris style getting stuck on a zip wire waving Union Jacks? Leading up to the 2nd of May, when Khan hopes to secure a third term as his Conservative rival Susan Hall vies for the capital's top job, I'll explore some of the critical issues impacting Londoners' lives, from knife crime and public transport fares to council tax hikes and rocketing rents. Now we're joined in the studio by Evening Standard City Hall editor Ross Lydall and Noah Vickers, the Standard's open democracy reporter covering City Hall. Okay, well, I mean, first of all, it's maybe a bit of a brash question, but the title of this episode is, what is the point of the London Mayor? We've now had one for nearly a quarter of a century. We've had Ken Livingstone, Boris Johnson and Sadiq. How much power does the mayor actually have, and how much can they affect things? And how much of it is ceremonial, would you say?
One person who is close to the current mayor used to always like to say at times of controversial stories, wouldn't it be great if we had somebody to blame? And that in essence is often what the Mayor of London is for on a day-to-day basis. It's somebody for either journalists or Londoners to perhaps direct their criticism at. In terms of what he actually does, he sets the budget for the Metropolitan Police. He doesn't tell the cops who to go and arrest, but he does say you can have £8 billion next year, and he decides how much he's going to charge in council tax for that. He sets the Transport for London fares, so he sets the bus and tube fares. He has a role in sort of big planning applications, and he has various other, not so much invisible powers, but sort of soft powers. It's often, the City Hall role is often sort of described as either a bit of a sort of bully pulpit or a sort of soapbox, so he can pipe up about issues of concern to him or other Londoners. And obviously it tends to be more effective if he speaks out on issues of concern to the majority of Londoners.
What is the process in terms of if the mayor woke up tomorrow and decided, I'm going to raise single bus fares to £15, or I'm going to ban people listening to loud music on the tube? Would there be anybody who he would have to get through in government? Like, what would be the process in terms of going to the government and getting something passed into law?
The mayor has devolved powers from central government to set the fares and essentially oversee Transport for London. The mayor also doubles up as the chair of Transport for London. So in terms of fares, it is his own decision in terms of exactly how much or how little to raise fares by. So it's potentially feasible for him to increase bus fares, say, for example, from £1.75 to £17.50, should he want. He would have to seek the advice of Transport for London before he did that. That advice is given to him on a sort of private basis, although not necessarily a confidential basis. But it's highly likely if he did something out of the ordinary like that and appeared to make a sort of perverse policy sort of introduction, that his rivals would essentially seek judicial review of that. So he has to act in sort of good faith and sort of common sense at the same time. You can't just do bonkers things. You can't decide, in the old days, there was, I recall one row when Ken Livingstone, when he was mayor, talked about, I think, either raising fares or council tax by the value of a walnut whip. Now, older listeners may just about recall a walnut whip, but I think around then a walnut whip was around sort of 33 pence. And, Sadiq has actually frozen fares this time, certainly Transport for London fares. But in terms of what can he do, he can pretty much do what he wants.
And I think it's worth coming in on that point that the way the mayoralty was designed was to have a sort of presidential figure that wouldn't be kind of encumbered by needing to get votes passed in particular ways. It's not like a prime minister kind of worrying about rebels that might kind of sink their plans. He's not dependent on the London Assembly to pass individual decisions. It really is a kind of one-man executive.
What's both of your senses? Are Londoners broadly in favour of having a mayor, would you say?
Well, they voted in favour of having one, of course, when there was a referendum. And I don't think there's much evidence that a majority want to get rid of one, as they have in Bristol, for example. I think having a sort of figurehead who is able to speak with one voice on some of the big issues facing Londoners is something that is sort of broadly appreciated, even if they disagree with what might be being said by the incumbent. And also, I think people recognise on the whole that there are services that are provided across the whole city that someone is going to need to be responsible for in a way that individual boroughs couldn't.
Yeah, if you look back 30 or 40 years in the history books, there used to be a London government that was called the Greater London Council. Maggie Thatcher didn't like that when she was Prime Minister, primarily because it was run by Ken Livingstone. So she got rid of the GLC, and between 1986 and 2000, until the modern GLA, as it's now called, came into being, then there were sort of 14 years when London had no oversight or nobody essentially in the big black seat, if you like, running the city. And the implications of that were primarily seen in the transport system, when essentially you had some pretty knackered tubes and trains running around and the city sort of falling slightly into disrepair in terms of its infrastructure.
Let's go to the ads. Welcome back. So, in my day job as deputy editor of ES Magazine, I was quite shocked when we sent someone to interview Sadiq. And as a kind of almost blasé throwaway question, I said, are you in any WhatsApp groups with Rishi? And she asked him and he said, I don't even have Rishi's number, which I found quite shocking, to be honest, that the Mayor of London can't even directly get hold of the Prime Minister. Is that normal? And would it be, how much better will it be if there is a Labour government and a Labour mayor, or a Tory government and a Tory mayor? How much easier will that make the process of being a London mayor?
I think what's even more shocking is that Sadiq doesn't even do WhatsApp. To the best of my knowledge, he's somebody who only texts. And I think it may be partly through security fears that he doesn't seem to do WhatsApp groups. In terms of your question, has he not got Rishi's number? Well, he probably has actually got somebody close to Rishi, if not Rishi himself, but you probably wouldn't find that incredibly surprising that he wouldn't be able to text the Prime Minister directly, because they are from other sides. Obviously, should Keir come in, then he does have his number already. And that's one of the things that he's hoping for, because it wasn't long ago when I was trying to establish from Sadiq, what is the point of your third term? What do you want to do that you haven't done already? Why should Londoners give you another crack at being mayor? And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, well, it would be great to be able to work with a Labour government.
Yeah, agree. I just remember back to at the start of the pandemic. I just remember, it's one of my vivid memories, is remembering seeing him on TV and he was trying to get PPE for bus drivers and stuff like that. And he was just being forced to go on TV going, I've put the call in, but let's see what comes back. And it felt a kind of very strange position for a mayor to be on television saying that kind of thing. So presumably he would be really, really relishing the prospect of a Keir Starmer-led government. Presumably that's going to help a great deal in terms of getting more funding or more things through the books faster.
It's worth remembering, though, that Sadiq does have £21 billion a year of public money to spend. He's not exactly short of a few bob or two. So quite often he does say it's the government's fault or the government has to give me more money, but he's actually got a heck of a lot already.
It's also true, though, that, in terms of the amount of time that he's been mayor, he's never had Labour in power nationally in the way that both of his predecessors had, their same party in power nationally. And so the claim he's made repeatedly is that he would be able to govern more effectively if Labour were in power in 10 Downing Street.
And how do you think, on reflection, how important to the trajectory of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson do you think his tenureship as London Mayor was to his rise? I mean, it felt like he became much more than Ken Livingstone. To me, it felt like that he kind of turned it into becoming almost a celebrity and was so visible. And that I felt like that he was just everywhere all the time. Would you agree with that? And do you think it was a big part of him getting to where he eventually got?
Yeah, I think definitely it's a fantastic platform in terms of getting yourself across in photo stunts or whatever sort of PR you might want. You've got an enormous team, as we were discussing earlier, that are kind of trumpeting every single policy or amount of money you're putting out at any given moment. And for someone that would want to take advantage of all that, definitely, I think it was a really important springboard for Boris Johnson. Ross was there firsthand. Yeah.
I wouldn't say Sadiq is, if you like, the anti-Boris. He didn't actually stand against Boris. It was Zach Goldsmith who was the Tory candidate back in 2016, because Boris had done 2 terms and decided not to go on for a third. But what is quite clear is that Sadiq is a very different kind of operator and personality to Boris. Boris was the biggest personality we've had as London Mayor. I don't think there's any doubt. He brought this sort of showbiz sparkle to the job, that whereas Ken Livingstone had this sort of great blue sky thinking and was a proper Londoner to his sort of boots, if you like, he knew every street, every bus route, and you would never catch him out. He knew more about London than anybody asking him a question about it. And to his credit, he knew exactly what to do. He'd done it before, and he went on and did some of the most important things that we're enjoying today. For example, the London Overground. That would not be the success it is today if it was not for Ken Livingstone's foresight and seeing how that line could be transformed. You had Boris bringing typical bravado and, everything from crazy off-the-cuff speeches, blunders, sound bites, heaven, if you like, and some questionable antics at City Hall, shall we say, to then Sadiq, who came in as a much more sober individual, somebody who probably is much more of a political operator in a more conventional sense, but also somebody who very much got his plan mapped out. A very serious chap. He still likes to be the cheeky chappy at times and can still sometimes say a bit too much or get a bit too caught up in the moment. And he's such a sort of political animal as well. He loves to look to give the Tories, who are, if they're giving him a hard time, he'll love to give them a biff on the nose, sort of metaphorically speaking, back. But he's the most serious of all 3 mayors we've had so far, the most conscientious. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's got this sort of lawyer's attention to detail, and he certainly does his homework, which is something that Boris was not fond of doing.
I mean, he does seem to enjoy the celebrity aspect of it to a certain extent. Like he's not shy of turning up at a party and being photographed with. Is that fair to say about Sadiq? I mean, I did see him when I went to see Madonna at the O2. He was sat with his wife and Rita Ora and her husband, Taika Waititi, the director. And they were kind of right at the front. And then I looked round about half an hour and he'd gone. So he'd sitting with Rita Ora. That's real celebrity schmoozing, I would say.
I think he does. I'm pretty sure about this, but I think he has to buy many of his tickets, to be fair to him. I'm sure he went to see Bruce Springsteen in Hyde Park last summer, but I'm not sure he necessarily had backstage access with the boss.
Yeah, and I happened to see Sadiq at a play in the summer of 2022, a few months before I started at the Evening Standard, which was all about the city planner Robert Moses, who created sort of highways, or he wanted to create big roads through the middle of New York. It was kind of all about the evil of the car and how it sort of hurts some of the most vulnerable communities. And I did wonder if that was a few months ahead of you, Les, what ideas that could have given him.
There's much more news and features in the Evening Standard newspaper and online at standard.co.uk. We're back tomorrow at 4 p.m.